8.12 hours, October 24th, 1943, Nikopol bridgehead, Dnieper River, the Eastern Front. Staff Sergeant Josef Sepp Allerberger lay perfectly still inside a ruined granary, 400 meters behind German lines. Through his sniper scope, he observed something that would rattle even the most seasoned soldiers. For the past 4 days, a Soviet sniper cell had been systematically decimating his regiment's leadership. 8 officers dead, 12 NCOs wounded. Always the same. Precise shot, always from unseen positions. The 3rd Mountain Division was paralyzed by fear. No one dared issue an order anymore. No one could pinpoint the enemy, until his commander gave him an order that sounded simple, yet was unbelievably deadly. Find them, all 8 of them, eliminate them, today. Allerberger was only 18 years old, but he already had 27 confirmed kills, and he possessed something that no other German soldier in that sector had. The mind of a hunter. Today, he wouldn't be hunting animals. Today, he would be hunting hunters. In the autumn of 1943, the situation on the Eastern Front was catastrophic. After the defeat at Kursk in July, the Red Army rolled westward unstoppably. The German army fought desperately to hold strategic positions, but the Soviet pressure was relentless. The Nikopol bridgehead on the Dnieper River was one of those positions. Nikopol wasn't just any town. Beneath the earth lay the largest manganese ore deposits in the Western Soviet Union. 50 kilometers to the northwest, near Krivoy Rog, were equally vast iron ore deposits. These minerals were essential for steel production. Whoever controlled Nikopol controlled the war production. The Soviets wanted it back. Hitler refused to give it up. And caught between these 2 iron wills were soldiers like Josef Allerberger. Josef Sepp Allerberger was born on December 24, 1924, in Styria, Austria. Growing up in the mountains, he learned to hunt before he could read. His father, an experienced mountain guide and hunter, taught him to read nature the way others read books. By the age of 8, Joseph could take down a deer at 300 meters with a single shot. At 12, he was winning regional shooting competitions against adults. But the most important thing his father taught him wasn't shooting, it was patience. The ability to remain perfectly still for hours, the art of becoming invisible. These skills made him an extraordinary sniper. They would keep him alive today. In June 1943, at just 18 years old, Allerberger was sent to the Eastern Front, initially as a machine gunner in the 2 Battalion of Mountain Infantry Regiment 144, part of the 3rd Mountain Division, near Stavropol in the Caucasus. He was slightly wounded by shrapnel. During his recovery, he found a captured Soviet Mosin Nagant 9130 rifle with a 3.5x PU scope. Out of curiosity, he began to experiment with it. The weapon was robust, precise, designed for extreme conditions. In 2 weeks, Allerberger achieved 27 confirmed kills with the Soviet rifle, more than most German snipers achieved in 3 months. His superiors noticed his talent. In September 1943, he was sent to formal sniper training at Seattle Alps in Styria. 4 weeks of intense training in camouflage, ballistics, fieldcraft. He was equipped with a German Carabiner 98K sniper variant with a precise 4x scope. In early October, he returned to Nikopol. 3 weeks later, he would experience the deadliest single day of his career. The Soviet sniper cell terrorizing Allerberger's regiment wasn't just a random collection of shooters. It was a coordinated tactical unit, a masterclass in Soviet sniper doctrine. The Red Army had turned sniper training into a science. After the heavy losses of 1941, the Soviet leadership realized that precision fire had strategic value. Snipers weren't just soldiers, they were psychological weapons. A single good shooter could paralyze an entire company, eliminate officers, destroy morale. The Soviets invested heavily in sniper programs. Schools were opened, tactics were standardized, and one of those tactics was the cell formation. A typical Soviet sniper cell consisted of 6 to 10 shooters, organized into teams of 2, a shooter and an observer. These teams didn't work independently, they coordinated. The famous 6 tactic, developed by Vasily Zaitsev and his partner Nikolai Kulikov during Stalingrad, covered a large area from 3 positions, with 2 men at each point, a shooter, a spotter. After each shot, the teams switched positions. The shooter became the observer. The observer became the shooter. This rotation made it nearly impossible to locate them, and this was exactly the tactic the cell-hunting Allerberger's regiment was using. For 4 days, these 8 Soviet snipers had executed a flawless operation. In the morning, when German officers discussed the daily situation, the first shot rang out. At noon, during the meal distribution, the second fell. In the evening, during the changing of the guard, the third. Always from different directions, always with deadly precision. The Germans tried everything: artillery bombardments on suspected positions, machine gun fire into suspicious areas, infantry patrols for reconnaissance. Nothing worked. The Soviet shooters were ghosts. They left no trace, they made no mistakes, and every day, another German officer died. On the morning of October 24, 1943, Captain Werner Hoffmann, the company commander, summoned Allerberger. Hoffmann was a tough man, a veteran since Poland, but his hands trembled as he spoke. "Allerberger," he said, "we have a problem. These Soviet devils are killing us one by one. Our men are scared. Officers are hiding. This cannot continue. You're a hunter, aren't you, from the mountains? You understand how to hunt predators." Allerberger nodded slowly. Hoffmann continued, "I'm giving you full autonomy. No orders, no restrictions. Find these bastards and kill them, all of them, today. If you succeed, I will personally recommend you for the Iron Cross First Class." Allerberger saluted. "Zu Befehl, Herr Hauptmann." "Understood, Captain." But inwardly he thought, 8 targets, 6 hours of daylight. This isn't just shooting, this is hunting in its purest, deadliest form. And here's something you might not know. If you appreciate historical stories like these, you can directly support this channel through YouTube Super Thanks. Every contribution helps us conduct even deeper research and produce even more precise historical content. Just click on the Super Thanks button below this video. Thank you. But back to Josef Sepp Allerberger and his deadly mission. Allerberger's first decision was the most important. He wouldn't think like a sniper. He would think like a hunter. The difference was fundamental. A sniper waits for targets. A hunter actively hunts them. A sniper takes a position and stays there. A hunter moves constantly. A sniper tries to remain invisible. A hunter makes himself intentionally visible to bait his prey. Allerberger had hunted wolves in the Styria Mountains, the most intelligent predators in Europe. Wolves could smell traps, read tracks, sense hunters from miles away. To hunt a wolf, you had to think like a wolf. Today, Allerberger had to think like 8 Soviet snipers. He began with observation. The last 8 kills had a pattern. 3 came from the northeastern sector, a destroyed village 800 meters from the German lines. 2 came from the east, from a strip of woods along a dried-up creek. 3 came from the southeast, from the ruins of an old mill. Allerberger studied the firing angles, the times of day, the target selection, and he saw it. The Soviet snipers were working in a rotation system. They had 3 main zones, and they changed positions within those zones every day. Clever, but predictable once you recognized the pattern. At 09:30 hours, Allerberger positioned himself in the destroyed granary, 400 meters behind the German lines. The position was perfect. Elevated line of sight, cover from thick stone walls, multiple escape routes, but most importantly, the position was unlogical. No normal sniper would hide behind his own lines to shoot forward. That's exactly why Allerberger chose it. He took his carabiner 98K, loaded a single 7.92 by 57mm cartridge, and waited. His scope was trained on the northeastern zone, the destroyed village. He knew the Soviet snipers would soon make their first move. At 10:47 hours, he saw it. A tiny movement in a window of the third building from the left second floor. The movement lasted less than a second. A normal observer wouldn't have noticed it, but Allerberger had spent years observing deer in dense forests. His brain was trained to recognize anomalies. The window had darkened minimally, as if something were blocking the light. A head, maybe a shoulder. Allerberger exhaled slowly. His heart rate dropped to 52 beats per minute, a trick his father had taught him. Slower heartbeat meant steadier hand. Steadier hand meant more precise shot. He aimed 15 centimeters to the right of the last movement. That's where the Soviet sniper would position his rifle. He gently squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the battlefield. 612 meters distance, the 7.92mm bullet flew through the cold autumn air at 760 meters per second. Flight time, 0.8 seconds. Allerberger saw through his scope that the window was suddenly sprayed with red. Hit. The first Soviet sniper was eliminated, but now came the critical part. The other 7 would have heard the shot. They would triangulate the direction, and they would start searching for him. Allerberger had maybe 3 minutes before they located his position. He moved immediately. No time to confirm the kill. No time to hesitate. He slipped through a hole in the back wall of the granary, crawled 40 meters through tall grass, and disappeared into a sewer drain. Total elapsed time since the shot, 47 seconds. Position 2 was a burned-out Soviet T-34 tank, 280 meters east of his first position. The tank had been there since August, destroyed by a German 88mm gun. A rusty wreck that both sides ignored. Allerberger crawled through the hatch into the turret. The interior reeked of burned oil and death, but the line of sight was perfect. Through the 76mm cannon opening, he had a direct view of the strip of woods to the east. He loaded a new cartridge and waited. 18 minutes passed. Nothing. Allerberger remained perfectly still, despite the cramps in his legs, despite the stench. Patience was everything. His father had once told him, "A good hunter can wait 3 days for the perfect shot." Allerberger only had to wait 3 hours. At 11:23 hours, something moved in the strip of woods. A branch swayed against the wind. Impossible, unless something had touched it. Allerberger focused his scope. 3 meters to the left of the branch, half hidden behind a fallen log, lay a human form. Camouflage was excellent, but not perfect. The Soviet sniper was wearing a ghillie suit made of local vegetation. But a small detail betrayed him. His rifle barrel reflected the sunlight minimally, a mistake Allerberger would never make. He aimed at the point where head and neck should connect. 340 meters distance. Light wind from the northwest. 8 kilometers per hour. He corrected 7 centimeters to the right and fired. The second Soviet sniper was dead before his brain registered he'd been hit. The bullet pierced the medulla oblongata, the brainstem that controls autonomous functions. Instantly lethal. No scream, no twitch, just silence. Allerberger observed for 3 seconds through his scope. No movement. Confirmed. 2 eliminated. 6 remaining. But now the surviving Soviets had 2 data points, 2 shots, 2 different positions. They would start looking for a pattern. Allerberger had to break the pattern. He exited the T-34 through the floor hatch, crawled under the tank, and ran in a crouch 60 meters south, where a small bomb crater offered him temporary cover. And right here you need to understand, what Allerberger did was not just exceptional shooting, it was exceptional tactics. Normal snipers stay in one position, shoot, and hope not to be discovered. Allerberger did the opposite. He moved constantly. He became the moving target, which paradoxically was safer because the Soviet snipers could not predict where he would be next. This tactic would later be documented in sniper manuals as reverse hunting, a method where the hunter behaves like prey to bait the true hunter. But in 1943, in Nikopol, Allerberger invented this tactic spontaneously, guided only by his instinct as a mountain hunter. Position 3 was the riskiest place he could have chosen, an open trench barely 150 meters from the Soviet lines, so close he could hear Russian voices, so close that any movement could mean his death. But Joseph Sepp Allerberger knew something about human psychology. People look for threats at a safe distance. No one expects the enemy right under their nose. He dug himself flat into the loamy soil of the trench, covered himself with dry grass and dirt, until only his face and rifle barrel were exposed. From above, he was invisible, and he waited. 40 minutes, motionless, barely breathing. Mosquitoes bit his face. He didn't react. A beetle crawled across his cheek. He didn't blink. This was the discipline his father had taught him. Ignore the body, become part of the earth. At 12:37 p.m. he heard footsteps, light, cautious. About 30 meters to the left, Allerberger moved only his eyes, not his head. 2 Soviet soldiers moved through the ravaged landscape, a rifleman and his spotter. They spoke quietly in Russian. Allerberger didn't understand the language, but the tone was clear. They were looking for him. The spotter held binoculars, scanning the surroundings methodically. The rifleman carried a Mosin Nagant 9130 with a PU scope, identical to the rifle Allerberger had used in Stavropol. They moved closer. 25 meters, 20 meters, 15 meters. Allerberger's finger rested on the trigger, but he didn't fire, not yet. 2 targets, 1 bullet in the chamber. He had to wait for them to separate until one was vulnerable. At 12 meters distance, the spotter stopped, pointed west, said something to the rifleman. The rifleman nodded, turned to the west, raised his rifle to look through the scope. Perfect. His head was now in profile, completely exposed. Allerberger had a shot line of 11 meters. Impossible to miss. He aimed for the spot directly behind the ear, where the skull bone is thinnest, and fired. The bang was deafening at that distance. The Soviet rifleman collapsed instantly, dead before he hit the ground. The spotter reacted with impressive speed, threw himself to the ground, drew his Tokarev TT-33 pistol, fired blindly in Allerberger's direction. 3 shots, all missed, but narrowly. 1 bullet struck the clay 30 centimeters to the left of Allerberger's head. He had no time to aim, no time to reload. He rolled right, drew his own sidearm, a Walter P-38, and fired twice. Both shots hit the spotter in the chest. The Soviet gasped, tried to crawl, but life left him in seconds. 4 down, 4 to go. But now Allerberger's position was compromised. The exchange of gunfire had been loud. Other soldiers would come. Allerberger sprinted from the trench, zigzagging through debris, reached a half-destroyed barn 80 meters to the south. He was out of breath, his heart hammered. Adrenaline flooded his body, but he couldn't stop. 4 Soviet snipers were still out there, and now they were alerted. They knew a German hunter was hunting them. The game had changed. It was no longer hunter versus prey. It was hunter versus hunter. And that was the deadliest kind of fight. Imagine how YouTube Super Thanks directly helps create such detailed historical analyses. Each contribution enables deeper research, more precise reconstructions. Click super thanks under this video if you enjoy this kind of content. Now, back to Joseph Sepp Allerberger's deadliest hour. The barn offered minimal cover but good visibility. Allerberger positioned himself upstairs, behind half-burned bales of hay. He methodically reloaded his Carabiner 98K, visually inspected each cartridge for damage, a ritual that calmed him. 5 rounds in the magazine, 4 targets left, mathematically feasible. But mathematics were irrelevant in war. He had to find them before they found him. Through his scope, he systematically scanned the landscape. Northeast, the destroyed village where Target 1 had fallen. East, the strip of woods where Target 2 was eliminated. Southeast, the ruins of the old mill. There, the mill. 3 Soviet kills in 4 days had come from there. If the surviving snipers were reorganizing, they would return to known safe positions. Human nature. At 1:52 p.m., he saw movement near the mill. Subtle, a shadow that shouldn't be there. Allerberger focused, 680 meters distance. On the edge of his effective range with the K98K, wind had picked up, now 15 kilometers per hour from the northwest. Temperature had dropped to 9 degrees Celsius. All these variables affected the ballistics. Allerberger had no ballistic tables, no computer system, only experience and instinct. He calculated mentally, 680 meters with a 7.92 millimeter round means about 2.1 meters of bullet drop. Wind from the left requires 40 centimeters of right correction. Target isn't moving. Inhale, exhale, half inhale, hold, squeeze. The shot flew through the afternoon air. Allerberger watched through his scope. The flight time at that distance was almost a full second, enough time for a target to move slightly. The bullet hit, but not fatally. He saw the Soviet soldier stumble, clutch his shoulder, fall behind cover. Wounded, not dead. Allerberger cursed softly. A wounded target was more dangerous than a dead one. It could still shoot, still communicate, and still warn, and it revealed his position. Immediately he heard the whiz of an incoming bullet 20 centimeters over his head. Then a second whiz, a third. The surviving Soviet snipers had seen his muzzle flash. They were firing at his position in a coordinated manner. Allerberger threw himself to the ground, rolled behind the hay bales. Wood splinters exploded around him. A bullet pierced a hay bale. Missed his leg by centimeters. He had seconds to react. The barn was becoming a death trap. He crawled to the back wall, kicked out a rotten plank, squeezed through the opening, dropped 2 meters, landed hard on rubble. Pain shot through his left ankle. Sprain not broken. Good enough. He limped to a nearby shell crater, dropped inside, pressed himself against the earth. Above him, he heard the Soviet snipers destroying the barn with coordinated fire. Methodical. Professional. They were taking no chances. If Allerberger had stayed there, he'd be dead now. 20 minutes passed. The firing stopped. Silence. The Soviets were waiting to see if he would return fire. Allerberger didn't move. He assessed his situation. 5 targets eliminated or wounded. 3 healthy enemies remained, possibly 4. If the wounded one was still combat effective, his position was known, his ankle was injured. Daylight would end in 3 hours. The odds were stacked against him, but Joseph Sepp Allerberger hadn't survived by giving up. He survived by adapting. Position 4 was the most psychological choice he could make. He returned to the destroyed granary. His first position, it was counterintuitive. No soldier returns to a compromised position. That's exactly why he did it. The Red Army snipers would expect him to retreat, regroup, maybe even abort the operation. They wouldn't expect him to return to his starting point. Allerberger limped through cover, using every hole, every shadow. His ankle burned, but he ignored the pain. At 3:17 p.m., he reached the granary. Everything was as he'd left it. He positioned himself at the eastern window, aimed his rifle at the mill, and then he did something very clever and very dangerous. He deliberately fired at an empty position, 200 meters to the right of the mill. The shot was bait. Allerberger wasn't aiming at anything. The purpose was to give the Soviets a false location. They would see the muzzle flash, calculate the direction, think he was 200 meters further right of the granary, and they would focus their attention there. It worked. Allerberger saw through his scope 3 figures moving minimally at the mill, their rifles swinging to the right. 3 seconds of exposure. Enough. He aimed at the middle figure. The sniper who was most exposed, 680 meters again. Same calculations as before, but this time he was prepared. He squeezed the trigger. The bullet flew perfectly. Hit. The Red Army sniper collapsed. Dead. 6 eliminated. 2 left. Maybe 3 with the wounded one. But now, the surviving Soviets realized the trick. They didn't fire at the false position. They fired directly at the granary. Allerberger heard the characteristic whine of the Mosin Nagant 9130 bullets. One struck the window frame, 40 centimeters to the left. Another pierced the wall behind him. These snipers were good, very good. Allerberger had no time for a second shot. He rolled backwards, exiting the granary through the same hole as hours before. But this time, there was a surprise waiting outside. A Soviet grenade exploded 15 meters to his right, an RGD-33 hand grenade. The concussive blast threw him to the ground. Shrapnel grazed his right cheek, blood dripped into his eye. He wiped it away, forced himself to his feet. Through blurred vision, he saw 2 Red Army soldiers charging towards him. 50 meters away, one carried a rifle. The other was throwing a second grenade. Allerberger had no time to aim the carabiner 98K. Too slow. He dropped it, drew his Walter P38, fired 4 shots at the grenade thrower. 2 hit. The Soviet fell. The grenade slipped from his hand, rolled 4 meters, exploded harmlessly away from both of them. The second Soviet, the rifleman, dropped to the ground, aimed his Mosin Nagant 9130. Allerberger and the Soviet sniper fired simultaneously. Allerberger's bullet struck the Soviet in the throat, but the Soviet bullet hit too. Allerberger felt burning pain in his left upper arm. The 7.62 millimeter bullet had pierced his flesh, missing the bone by millimeters. A flesh wound, painful but not life-threatening. But his left arm was now partially unusable. 7 eliminated, 1 or 2 left. Allerberger staggered towards a nearby bunker, a German machine gun nest, abandoned for weeks. He tore a piece from his shirt, wrapped it around his bleeding arm, tightened it with his teeth and right hand. The bleeding slowed, not good, but manageable. He checked his ammunition. 3 rounds in the carabiner 98K magazine, 4 in the pistol. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from exhaustion and adrenaline crash. He had eliminated 7 targets in 6 hours, but one was still out there. The deadliest, the last, the smartest, the most careful, the survivor. It's now 4:43 p.m. Daylight would end in 90 minutes. Josef Sepp Allerberger knew if he didn't find the last Red Army sniper before dark, the night would give the enemy an advantage. Darkness meant the Soviet could retreat, reorganize, reinforce. Allerberger had to end it now. He forced his exhausted body to stand, checked his carabiner 98K for damage. Everything still worked. German engineering was robust. He loaded a fresh round, moved out of the bunker, crawled towards the mill. The Soviets had been operating from there. If one survived, he would return there. It was the strongest position. The safest base. Human nature draws us to familiar places in stressful situations. The ruins of the old mill were a complex labyrinth of collapsed walls, burned beams, shattered millstones, perfect for ambushes, perfect for defense, terrible for attack. Allerberger approached from the south, the least expected angle. Every step was calculated, every noise was minimized. He moved like a shadow, like his father had taught him, when stalking deer at dawn. At 40 meters distance, he stopped, listened. Wind whistled through broken windows. A bird called in the distance, but there was something else. A click, metallic, faint, like someone releasing a rifle safety. Allerberger focused on the sound. Northwestern corner of the mill, second floor, behind a half-collapsed beam. He couldn't see the position directly, but he could feel it. Hunter's instinct. He had 3 options: attack head-on, suicidal. Wait for the Soviet to move. Could take hours, or force the Soviet to move. Allerberger chose option 3. He picked up a stone, threw it 20 meters east, where it clanged loudly against metal. Instantly, something moved on the second floor. The Red Army sniper turned minimally towards the sound. A half-second of exposure. Allerberger fired. The distance was only 40 meters, impossible to miss. The bullet struck the Soviet sniper in the right side of his chest. Piercing his lung, the Soviet fell backwards, his Mosin Nagant 9130 clattering to the floor. Allerberger didn't wait. He sprinted forward, Walter P-38 in hand, ready for close combat. He reached the second floor, found the Red Army sniper lying on the ground, blood bubbling from his mouth, still alive, but dying. Their eyes met. The Soviet was young, maybe 20, blonde hair, blue eyes. He could have been Allerberger's brother. The Soviet tried to speak, but only blood came out. Allerberger knelt down, taking the dying man's rifle, not cruelly, just carefully. The Soviet nodded weakly, as if he understood. No hatred in his eyes, just acceptance. He died 30 seconds later. Allerberger searched the mill methodically. He found traces of 8 positions, empty cartridge cases, food scraps, a Soviet map with German positions marked, and something surprising, a diary. Allerberger couldn't read Russian, but the dates were clear. The Soviet sniper cell had been operating in this area for 3 weeks, not 4 days. 3 weeks. They had eliminated 27 German officers and staff sergeants, not 12. The German losses had been much higher than Allerberger's captain had admitted. These 8 Soviets had almost destroyed the operational capability of an entire German company, and Allerberger had eliminated them all in 6 hours. At 5:18 p.m., Allerberger returned to the German lines. Soldiers stared at him as if they were seeing a ghost. His face was smeared with blood. His arm was bandaged with dirty cloth. He was limping. His uniform was torn, but he was alive. Captain Hoffman came running out, disbelief in his eyes. Allerberger reported, 8 enemy snipers eliminated. Mission accomplished. Hoffman stared at him. 8. In 1 day. How? Allerberger shrugged. I hunted, Sir Captain. Like my father taught me, Hoffman saluted, something officers rarely did for staff sergeants. You're a damn mountain division devil. Allerberger, I'll recommend you for the Iron Cross, as promised. The Iron Cross First Class never officially came through. Bureaucracy and the chaos of war prevented it. But on April 20th, 1945, just days before the war's end, Field Marshal Ferdinand Schörner, commander of Army Group Center, personally awarded Allerberger the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, one of the highest German military honors. No official documentation was ever registered. By that time, the German army was collapsing. Files were being burned. Systems were chaotic. But Allerberger carried this award for the rest of his life, not with pride, but with quiet acknowledgement for the comrades who hadn't survived. After the war, Josef Allerberger returned to his native Styria. He almost never spoke about his war experiences. No boasting, no stories, just silence. His wife later said that he sometimes woke up at night in a cold sweat, trembling, whispering in Russian, a language he had never formally learned, but which his subconscious had absorbed from the screams of dying men. 257 confirmed kills, 257 lives he had taken. Every face was burned into his memory. He became a mountain guide, like his father, leading tourists through the same mountains where he had hunted as a child. But he never carried a rifle again. Never. When friends invited him to go deer hunting, he politely declined. Those days are over. He simply said, in 2005, at the age of 80, Allerberger agreed to an interview with author Albrecht Wacker. The result was the book Sniper on the Eastern Front, the memoirs of Sepp Allerberger, Knight's Cross. Wacker spent months interviewing him, extracting stories that Allerberger had kept locked away for decades. The Nikopol bridgehead operation, with the 8 snipers, was documented in detail, corroborated with German and Soviet archives. The tactic Allerberger had used, the reverse hunting method, where the hunter behaves like prey to lure predators, has been analyzed in modern sniper manuals. Military academies in the US, UK, and Israel today study Allerberger's tactics as a case study in unconventional warfare. On March 2, 2010, Josef Sepp Allerberger died at the age of 85 in Waldseesenheim, Austria. His funeral was attended by only a few, no military honors. His tombstone bears only his name, date of birth, date of death, no mention of the war, no mention of his 257 kills, just the way he would have wanted it. He wanted to be remembered as a father, as a husband, as a mountain guide, as a man who, in the most horrific circumstances, did the impossible and spent the rest of his life trying to live with it. The 8 Soviet snipers that Allerberger eliminated that day at Nikopol remain nameless. Soviet archives from that period are incomplete. Many records were destroyed during the war or deliberately erased afterward. We don't know their names. We don't know their stories. We only know that they existed, they fought, and they died. 8 young men, probably between 18 and 25 years old, trained in the deadliest form of combat, eliminated by a single German hunter in 6 hours. Their families may have never received news of their fate, missing in action. That was all. No graves, no memorials, just silence. That's the reality of war that we often forget when we tell heroic stories. For every Allerberger whose name survived, there are 100 nameless soldiers on both sides who fought just as bravely, were just as skilled, but whose stories fell into the dustbin of history. The Eastern Front was a meat grinder that killed 27 million Soviet citizens and 4 million German soldiers. In that context, 8 men dying in one day are statistically irrelevant. But for those 8 men, for their mothers, their wives, their children, it was the entire world that ended. If you enjoy this type of in-depth historical analysis, please support this channel through YouTube. Super thanks. Every contribution helps us tell stories that would otherwise be forgotten. Click Super Thanks below. Thank you. The tactical lesson from Allerberger's operation in Nikopol is timeless. Unconventional thinking defeats conventional superiority. The 8 Soviet snipers were organized, well-equipped, trained, coordinated. They had numerical superiority. Home field advantage. 3 weeks of experience in the area. Allerberger was alone, wounded, less experienced, but he had something they didn't: the ability to break the rules. Normal snipers stay in one position. Allerberger moved constantly, Normal snipers avoid risk. Allerberger sought it out. Normal snipers wait for targets. Allerberger hunted them. That mental flexibility, that refusal to accept conventional tactics, made the difference between life and death. Modern military strategists study Allerberger's Nikopol operation as a prime example of asymmetric warfare. The Soviet sharpshooters operated according to doctrine. Allerberger operated on instinct. Every move he made was spontaneous, adapted to the ever-changing situation. His principles were simple. Move, change your camouflage, think like the prey, act like the hunter. These tactics are part of Special Forces training worldwide today. Navy SEALs, SAS, Spetsnaz. They all learn variations of Allerberger's reverse hunting. After the war, Allerberger was once asked, "If you could go back, would you do it again?" His answer was both honest and painful. "I don't know. As a young man, I thought I was defending my homeland. Now as an old man, I understand I was a tool in a machine that devoured people. Would I do it again? If I were the same 18-year-old boy who knew nothing but his village and the mountains, yes, probably. If I had the knowledge I have now, no. But that's the cruelty of history. We live forward, but only understand backward." Josef Allerberger died as the second highest scoring German sniper of World War II, surpassed only by his comrade Matthias Hetzenauer with 345 confirmed kills. Together, these two Styrian mountain farmers were responsible for over 600 Soviet deaths. Two ordinary men, transformed into extraordinary killing machines, not through hatred, but through circumstance, training, and a terrible talent. Their stories aren't tales of heroes. They are stories of survival, of men who did what they were ordered, who were brilliant in their deadly art, and who lived the rest of their lives with the ghosts of those they killed. The 8 Soviet snipers in Nikopol will never be forgotten, because they were never remembered. Their names are lost, their faces are forgotten. But their story survives through Allerberger's memory, through his confession, through his suffering. Every time he woke up in the night, drenched in sweat, whispering in Russian, he unconsciously honored the men he had killed. They lived on in his nightmares, eternal witnesses to his deadly ability. Perhaps that's the most just form of remembrance, not bronze statues or marble memorials, but the tormented dreams of the man who killed them. The Nikopol operation on October 24, 1943, lasted 6 hours and 8 minutes, from the first shot to the last. In that time, an 18-year-old Austrian mountain farmer eliminated 8 trained Soviet snipers through a combination of exceptional marksmanship, unconventional tactics, and deadly instinct. It was a masterpiece of military efficiency. It was also a tragedy, multiplied 8-fold. 8 lives, extinguished, 8 families, destroyed, 8 futures that never came, and 1 young man who lived with what he did that day for the rest of his life. This is the story of Josef Sepp Allerberger, the hunter who hunted hunters. 257 confirmed kills, Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross First Class, second highest scoring German sniper of World War II, and a man who, despite all his lethal brilliance, said at the end of his life, "I wish I had never touched a rifle." That is the true legacy of war, not medals, not honor. Only regret. If this story has made you think about the complexities of war, duty, and morality, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts. And if you'd like us to continue producing such detailed, nuanced historical analyses, support us through YouTube. Super thanks. Every contribution counts. Thank you for watching. And remember, history is never as simple as heroes and villains. It's complicated, tragic, and profoundly human.